The taboo of Englishness. Why is there such a taboo? Whenever someone says it's not racist to believe in English identity or that English identity even exists, there's always some weird pushback. But why? Why is Englishness the only identity we're forbidden to recognize, celebrate, specify? Why is it acceptable for every community to declare who they are, except the English? Why is Englishness treated like an embarrassment? Why must the majority identity remain invisible in its own country? I do think it's important to clarify and specify some terms: Englishness, English identity, English ethnicity, and I will get there. But before that, there are some ideas that fly around when it comes to this conversation that I would like to address. Number one, the English majority must ensure their ethnic pride doesn't slip into excluding people that look like me. Wrong. Ethnic identity is exclusive by nature. If you're one thing, you're usually not something else. That's not cruel, that's just how categories work. I know we have mixed identities, multiple identities, but you can't be all identities at once. Exclusivity in identity is a natural human phenomenon. The real problem isn't that these identities draw lines, it's that we've become so obsessed with moralizing these lines. People start acting like any boundary is hateful or evil, instead of a simple factual reality. It's completely normal that Englishness is tied to ancestry, history, cultural roots stretching back centuries. You either have those roots or you don't. Me? I don't. My heritage is Nigerian. That doesn't make me less of a person. It just means that I'm not ethnically English. And so what? Why is this even controversial? Telling me I'm not ethnically English isn't some racist insult. It's a fact. And this fact is nothing to cry about or throw tantrums about. I don't think English people should have to tiptoe around their identity just in case someone gets offended. It's so odd. Ethnic pride doesn't automatically mean hating outsiders, simply means that you're recognizing who you are, where you came from. So enough of the nonsense. English ethnicity is exclusive, it should be. Every ethnic identity is, and there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing wrong is lying about it or pretending everyone can be everything just to spare people's feelings. Another idea. Englishness exists, but it should be inclusive for anyone who calls England home. Not really. To be very clear, calling some place home isn't enough to make you ethnically part of the people there. As I said, ethnic identity has to do with ancestry, shared history, cultural roots stretching back generations. It's not even about skin color. Yes, skin color and ethnicity sometimes, actually oftentimes overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. Now, if I moved to China, spoke fluent Mandarin, and spent the rest of my life there, I might feel perfectly at home. But would that mean I'm ethnically Chinese? Of course not. I don't have any ancestral links to the Chinese people. My roots won't suddenly become Chinese simply because I chose to settle there. It's the same thing here. Living in England, loving England, doesn't automatically make someone ethnically part of the people if you don't have the ancestral and historical ties that define those people. I'm not talking about belonging, I'm talking specifically about ethnicity. We can't keep blurring things. Another wrong idea is that we should refrain from specifying what it means to be English because there's a lot of historical baggage. So freaking what? Historical baggage does not mean and should not mean that an ethnicity ceases to exist. It's become so fashionable to argue in some circles that Englishness should be dissolved into some broad, non-specific identity so that it can include everyone, or even that Englishness doesn't actually exist because it's too exclusive and it's tainted by the past. That is just wrong. Every group has historical baggage. No ethnic group is free from historical complexity. And if you know the history of Nigeria, you know it's full of difficult chapters: inter-ethnic conflicts, ancient slaving kingdoms, civil war involving massacres, and so much more. Should that mean that the Igbos and the Yorubas should stop existing? Of course not. They exist. Their histories, good and bad, are just part of who they are. The Chinese have dynasties that oppressed minorities and expanded their empire. No one suggests that because of this, their identities should be erased or flattened out. Japanese people people, their empire, committed atrocities in Asia. Nobody argues Japan should dissolve its ethnic identity. Japanese people continue to cherish their traditions, their language, their shared cultural memory. Arabs have a rich and ancient history, but also legacies of conquest, brutal slave trading that continues in many parts today. Just as recent as 2019, there were apps that you could actually buy slaves.
A new ad appears on For Sale. An African domestic worker for $3,800.
الو مرحبا. كيفك شكرا. عم بتصل فيك بخصوص العاملة الأفريقية على فور سيل.
أنا شباب صوتي حلال ومنشوشة.
So despite this, Arab identity remains strong and widely embraced across different countries. The Turks grapple with the history of the Ottoman Empire, genocide. Turkish identity still exists. No one claims it must be erased or watered down because of those events. So why single out the English? You can be both proud and honest about your history and identity. There's nothing inherently racist about being proud of your ethnic roots. The idea that English people should feel ashamed to even name themselves as an ethnic group is completely absurd. Pride and honesty aren't opposites. You can love your identity and still face up to the darker parts of your history. Yes, there was empire here. Yes, colonialism. This is all true. Acknowledging those truths doesn't make Englishness evil in itself or illegitimate. And more importantly, you did not commit the sins of your ancestors, so why should your present identity be erased because of that? And do you know what else I find extremely odd? Many on the left insist that Englishness is so dangerous that it's inseparable from racism, colonialism, exclusion. The mere suggestion that the English might be an ethnic group with deep historical roots is treated as borderline fascist. They continually resist the idea that there's such a thing as the ethnic English because they are terrified that it might fuel nationalism or discrimination. But then those same voices often insist that black and brown people like me absolutely are English, whether we want to be or not. If you're in fact black or brown in Britain, a lot of the same people insisting Englishness is racist will turn around and practically force Englishness on you. Remember Suella Braverman? She said she was British, but she didn't identify as English. Cue the outrage. How dare she say she's not English? It's as if Englishness is allowed, even required for so-called minorities, but somehow forbidden for the ethnic English themselves. White people asserting Englishness are told that they're racist. Ethnic minorities declining Englishness are somehow delusional or wanting to pander to the far right. This is the delusion at the heart of the modern left. They want Englishness to exist only as some symbolic tool to prove their own so-called anti-racism and open-mindedness. And it's useful for them to parade black and Asian people as proudly English because it lets them say, look, we're not racist, Englishness is for everyone. But then when white English people talk about Englishness as an ethnic identity, suddenly it's a crime. Suddenly it's Enoch Powell. Suddenly it's white nationalism. It's othering. The same leftists who force Englishness on minorities turn around and tell ethnic English people that it's evil to claim their own heritage. Something else. I do think there's some weird, deep resentment or discomfort about Englishness because it stands for achievement, a civilization that has contributed to a lot of good in the world. This hostility from some elites and activists isn't just about guilt or self-hating. It's about their inability to reconcile the reality that England and Britain as a whole has done extraordinary things historically, despite also having serious flaws, like I mentioned, yes. These people act like Englishness itself is shameful, something to always apologize for. But here's what I believe. Englishness is something to be proud of. In fact, this civilization has been one of the greatest forces of good in human history. Yes, there are chapters of cruelty and injustice like every other civilization, but the good overwhelmingly outweighs the bad, and I'm sick of pretending otherwise. Parliamentary democracy, freedom of speech and conscience, scientific and industrial revolutions, innovations that lifted millions from poverty and reshaped shaped human life. Humanitarian reforms, from child labor laws to universal education, many social advances were pioneered here. Language and culture, English literature, philosophy, art, enrich the entire world. Yes, other civilizations have their own, indeed, but this one is one of a kind. Abolition of the slave trade. It was the first great power to outlaw the trade and fight it worldwide. I'm a black woman and I say this with my chest. This civilization is great. I've benefited from the rights, the opportunities and stability that grew from England's historical institutions and values. I'm grateful for the freedoms I enjoy here, but many on the left can't stand to admit this. They can't reconcile that a nation they often blame for empire and oppression is actually the nation that pioneered modern freedoms, fought totalitarianism, created institutions that protect human dignity. They'd rather tear it all down than acknowledge that this country has been a force for extraordinary good. So they attack Englishness, calling it racist or exclusionary, while paradoxically insisting that minorities must adopt it. Well, it's time for the pretense to stop. Englishness deserves respect. This nation deserves pride. The good it has given the world matters profoundly. Now, just to confuse things a little bit, I do sympathize with people who all they know is Englishness. They may not be ethnically English, but they were born here. They know and love the culture. It's in their bones. It's in their blood. You know, can they claim being English as their identity if they want? I would say technically yes, because identity is a two-way dialogue. It's partly what a person says they are, but it is also how the world sees them. And sometimes how the world sees you doesn't stop you from seeing yourself a certain way. Identity is fluid like that. And I know that's hard for people to accept. Let me clarify further. I was watching a video of this man called White Yardi. Some of you might know him. And he was explaining that he's Jamaican. And it really got me thinking about this whole debate. Yes, he is culturally Jamaican. He grew up there, lived the life there, belongs to that culture. But ethnically, he's English.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
When did you decide that you were Jamaican? Was it when you came back over here? Was it when someone asked you? Like, was there an experience where you just felt, I identify as a Jamaican man?
Let me explain to you, yeah? And I don't know if I've ever said this on an interview anywhere yet, but my mother, before me, she had a miscarriage. So when she was pregnant with me, she could have gave birth to me in Jamaica.
Right.
But where we live, the hospitals weren't great. So obviously she has that opportunity to leave. Once she had me and did the checks, 3 months on a plane back to Jamaica. So from there until what I know has been that. So it's not like I wake up one day and say, oh, 5-year-old, I want to be Jamaican. Oh, 10-year-old, I think I'm Jamaican. 12-year-old,
Yeah, cool.
I'm definitely Jamaican.
Yeah.
It's just what's inside, you understand what I mean, brother?
And I genuinely sympathize with people like him or anyone who's only ever known one country and one culture, even if their roots are technically elsewhere. And that's why his video is titled Race and Culture Aren't the Same, because racially, ethnically, he knows he is one thing, but culturally, he identifies as something else. So English identity versus English ethnicity. Culturally, which is the English identity part, anyone can identify as English. Cultural Englishness describes someone who identifies with and participates in the customs, the values, the everyday life associated with England. Someone who is culturally English usually speaks English fluently, often picking up the regional accents, the local slang, and understands the subtle ways English people communicate. English ethnicity, that refers to the ethnic group of people primarily descended from historic populations such as the Anglo-Saxons, the Normans, the Vikings. It's not solely defined by race, but English ethnicity largely overlaps with being white because that owes to the country's demographic history. The English ethnicity is a specific real thing. They are a real people with real roots and a real history stretching back centuries. Not everyone automatically belongs to this ethnicity, and that's a simple reality. It's nothing hateful or cruel about saying so. It doesn't mean those outside the group can't love England or live here or connect to the English culture. These are people that deserve the same recognition, respect, and rights to their own identity as any other group on the planet. And it's ridiculous that in the one country where Englishness was born, it's become so taboo for ethnic English people to even name themselves, let alone feel proud of who they are. Ethnicity is important. I know that historically and currently, it's sometimes used in negative and divisive ways, but fundamentally, ethnicity is a way to tell the world your story. It connects people to a shared history, culture, and traditions. When the specific details of an identity is erased, minimized, the unique story behind that identity will get lost too. I've especially learned this from many Black Americans in the USA. I know there's a lot of debate there about race, but one thing I see many of them consistently say is that Black American is a specific ethnicity, not just a racial label, a specific ethnicity with its own history, culture, experiences. Many strongly feel that not every Black person from anywhere in the world should just claim the label Black American because it represents a distinct story rooted in a unique history. It is so complex. A lot was said, and like I said, I'm trying to make sense of it all. And more importantly, I'm trying to open up this conversation because I feel there has to be a consensus of what these terms are. Let's recap. Englishness, it's the broadest, a feeling or claim of belonging. English cultural identity is a little bit more concrete with practices, habits, a shared culture. English ethnicity, very specific, ancestry and heritage. We really should be able to talk about these things without fear or shame or confusion. Let me know what you think. My brain hurts. See you soon.